first look at a new exclusive game from Rare. A game that will allow our players to have unique and memorable adventures together. A shared world adventure game. Set in a fantastical world, this game will bring players together and give them the freedom to play with limitless possibilities.
Funny. Thinking about what could have been. This industry is full of that. Over the past 15 years, we've seen a company that was once considered a trailblazer wither away into a husk of its former self. A company that created so many memories for an entire generation of gamers. I've wanted to do this episode for the longest time, and with this being my 150th episode of Unboxed and the company's 30th anniversary, I couldn't think of a better time to ask the question. Rareware. What the f*** happened? Our story begins in the early 80s in the small town of Ashby in Leicestershire. Brothers Tim and Chris Stamper had spent the last few years working with arcade machines and had formed a love with gaming. Of course, gaming back then was very different, especially in the UK and Europe. The market had just been introduced to this new line of electronics called microcomputers. Devices like the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, the BBC Micro, and the Commodore VIC-20 and 64. The brothers, alongside two friends, started their own company to make games for the new trends. Their little company, founded out of a side room next to their family-run newsagent, would be known as Ashby Computer and Graphics. Their main console would be the ZX Spectrum, and they started work on their first game, Jetpack, and it would be released on cassette tape. That's right, tape. The computer reads the data through playing the tape in a connected player. And if you're wondering what that sounds like, here it is. Oh, don't you just dig that beat? Jetpack's premise was simple. You are an astronaut flying around shooting enemies while trying to repair your spaceship and gather fuel. The game ran very smoothly, and even by today's standards, the gameplay is simple and addictive. And back when it was released in 1983, it was a smashing success, selling over 300,000 copies, and making the brothers £1 million richer. A great return for two brothers who had to manufacture the games and distribute them themselves, with Chris as programmer and Tim designing the artwork. There was just one problem. Ashby Computer and Graphics sucked as a name for a game company. So the brothers created a label for their games to go under. That would be Ultimate Play the Game. And for the next few years, Ultimate would live up to its name, with games like Saberwolf, a 2D maze-like game set in a jungle playing an adventurer on the search for a fascinating treasure. Then, a sequel to Jetpack in Lunar Jetman, and Knight's Law, which has the distinction of being one of the first isometric games ever made. In fact, Altogether, the Stamper brothers and their small growing team would make 10 games in the span of 2 years. This was due to their work ethic. The small team worked like mad, 18-hour days, 7 days a week to work on their games. Sounds insane, but the brothers led by example, working just as hard as everyone else. They believed that a person working 9 to 5 would only produce a 9 to 5 game. Of course, they did take Christmas morning off. They weren't that insane. Tim himself used his brand new Lamborghini as an example of how hard work pays off. Because of the insane hours, the small crew never had time to do interviews or attend press events. This aura of secrecy would soon become company policy. For 2 years, Ultimate was riding high on success. So what do you do with that? You sell the company. Wait, what? In 1984, the brothers had gotten their hands on a device from Japan. A device from a company called Nintendo. That device was the family computer. The brothers knew this was the future of gaming. They also had heard Nintendo was planning on releasing the system worldwide. So, they sold the Ultimate label to competing UK developer, US Gold. Yeah, I don't get it either. And created a new division of ACG to work on this new system. That division would be called Rare. This new division was tasked into figuring out the complete workings of this 8-bit console, as well as how to reverse engineer it. Something Nintendo stated proudly was impossible to do. So, not surprisingly, the Stampers did just that. They would then develop prototypes they would present to Nintendo in Japan personally. Incredibly impressed with the initiative, Nintendo gave the Stampers and their new company Rare an amazing offer. You know how back in the late 80s and early 90s, Nintendo had this real dictatorship with third parties, limiting the amount of games one company could make throughout the year? Well, that wasn't the case with Rare. Nintendo gave the Stampers an almost unlimited budget to make games with, provided they find a publisher. The small studio was still sticking to the long hours and secrecy as before, and they started pumping out titles for the NES, starting in 1987 with Okay. Their first game wouldn't be anything groundbreaking, but that didn't stop them making a whole variety of games, like licensed titles like Game Shows, Hollywood Squares, Wheel of Fortune, and Jeopardy, ports like Sid Meier's Pirates, California Games, and Narc. They even had time to buy other studios, like Zippo Games, who made the third Jetman title. They even had some time for some original titles, like Wizards and Warriors and RC Pro-Am. Oh, and remember those LGN games the nerd hates so much? Well, Rare made a few of them. I know, James. I know. See, Rare had reached another problem. When they were Ultimate working on the Spectrum, they were the biggest fish in a small pond known as the UK market. But now they were with Nintendo on this world stage, and they were seen as just another developer. Nothing special whatsoever. Out of the almost 50 titles they've made for the NES, only a few stand out. And one of them was Battletoads.
Released in 1991, Battletoads starred Rash and Zitz on their quest to rescue their friend Pimple and Princess Angelica from the evil Dark Queen. The first level is a basic beat-em-up, the second level is a descent, and level 3 is the tunnel.
And that is as far as most people usually make it in this game. As most people know, this is up there as one of the hardest NES games out there. Not like broken difficult, more like Bloodborne was too easy for me. However, like most of their games, the gameplay was super fun, especially with how extravagant the attacks are, and the music was killer. But while it was Rare and all, Rare decided it was time to either go big or go home. And with Nintendo's new console, the Super Nintendo, about to arrive, they couldn't think of a better time to start fresh. Rare took the money they made from all their NES games and proceeded to buy high-end silicon graphic workstations. They wanted to take the SNES to the limits of what it could do. They wanted to make high-quality 3D models. Unfortunately, the SNES just couldn't handle that level of graphic fidelity. The solution they came up with may seem obvious now, but was a game changer back then. How about rendering the 3D models out as 2D sprites, giving a level of quality never seen before? They made a tech demo boxing game using this procedure to show off to Nintendo, and after making sure there wasn't a supercomputer hidden underneath the table, they even went ahead and purchased a stake in the company, meaning they were now a second-party developer. So, with that now the case, the Stamper Brothers wanted to make a game of a Nintendo property. Who did they pick?
Sorry, Donkey Kong. You're just not a draw anymore. Hey, he still got it.
Donkey Kong Country would be released in 1994 and blow everyone away. By this time, the SNES was almost 5 years old and with newer systems on the way. I've touched on before in my initial review how this blew everyone away, but I don't think I really grasped the situation that well. Imagine being 1994. You've already played Super Mario World and A Link to the Past and loved both. You were amazed with the Super FX tech in Starfox and the voices in Super Metroid. But then, you pop in this game and hear this amazing jingle. Everyone who delved into this game was playing something very, very special. If you didn't notice, after Nintendo was purchased, they were no longer just Rare, but Rareware. A name that would dig deep into the hearts of millions of gamers. And speaking of millions, Donkey Kong Country, with its sweet graphics, amazing platform, and diverse level design, would go on to sell 9 million copies, becoming the best-selling SNES game behind Super Mario World. Over the next 2 years, Rareware released 2 new Donkey Kong Country games. They would release Diddy Kong's Quest in 1995, which had you playing as Diddy and his girlfriend Dixie, and then the very next year released Double Trouble with Dixie and her cousin Kiddy Kong. But by 1996, it was time to go to the next generation. But before we do that, we need to go back to where gaming began. In 1994, using the same tech that ran Donkey Kong Country, Rareware would make a fighting game. Inspired by games like the technical Street Fighter 2 and the bloody Mortal Kombat, that game would be Killer Instinct. And the arcade game's opening would contain the biggest lie ever made in gaming.
Available for your home in 1995, only on Nintendo Ultra 64.
So, Nintendo was hoping to launch what was then known as the Ultra 64 in 1995. But that didn't happen. So instead, a port of the 64-bit arcade game was released on the 16-bit Super Nintendo. The result was very underwhelming. On its own terms, the game's fighting mechanics were top-notch, and it wasn't bad looking at all, but nothing compared to the arcade. 2 years later, Killer Instinct 2 would be released into arcades. And as luck would have it, a 64-bit Nintendo system did arrive that year, now known as the Nintendo 64. So that means KI2 will come to the N64, right? The major misconception with the original Killer Instinct was that it was running off N64 hardware. In actuality, while the CPU was the same, the rest was a custom-made arcade board by Rare with some help with Midway. Not to mention a built-in hard drive to handle the pre-rendered videos. The N64 just wasn't powerful enough, and using cartridge-based technology meant that storage of video wouldn't be possible. So instead, the N64 would get Killer Instinct Gold. Again, not a bad game, and most of the gameplay was the same as 2, but the 2D sprites didn't have the same graphic fidelity. But I've gone on and on about the story of Killer Instinct, without talking about what I think of the game. The truth is, I suck at fighting games. I can't combo, I can't break, I can't even get Orchid to show her tits. Although, I can't get enough of that soundtrack. Why did you think the opening was the KI theme? But now we've covered that, let's move on to the N64. Rareware had numerous teams working on several projects at the same time, both big and small in scope. The first game released would be Blast Corps. A game that lets you have as much fun destroying things, to clear a path for an out-of-control truck with a nuke on it. The gameplay was simple, and it was all about destroying as much as you can, and getting medals doing so. You have your choice of a variety of vehicles, and even a robot that allows you to level any playing field. Just make sure you clear the path before getting distracted. But what's more fun than destroying things? The next game was this small little project that no one really cared for. It was actually a license tile given to them by Nintendo for a movie that was already 2 years old. That game was Goldeneye. I've covered before how Goldeneye was developed by rookie Rareware employee Martin Hollis and a bunch of first-timers who just for shits and giggles threw in multiplayer a month before the game went out. That one action made it the third highest selling Nintendo 64 game in history. But I want to bring up an issue that I'll be seeing a lot of in this retrospective, and that's what I like to call the Rareware aiming problem, or RAP for short. Imagine wanting to do some precise aiming to shoot someone out of a tower. You take the control stick and you slowly move the targeting reticle until you're just over him, and then you release the stick and the target resets to the center of the screen. It just makes precise aiming just that more fiddly, especially now what we're accustomed to. But when Goldeneye was released, it really was a game changer. It was one of the first true console FPSs, and its multiplayer would inspire games for years to come. While Goldeneye was being developed, another team was working on a racing game. This was going to be a sequel to their NES title, RC Pro-Am, known as Pro-Am 64. However, when they showed their work to Shigeru Miyamoto at E3 997, he made the suggestion of putting Diddy Kong in it. At first, the team was reluctant to do so, but considering the Kongs had sold 15 million copies for Rareware, their minds quickly changed, and Diddy Kong Racing was born.
Not wanting to be just another Mario Kart 64 clone, Rareware decided to give it just that little more. Firstly, including not just cars, but planes and hovercrafts as well. But they also added something unheard of in a racing game. A plot, in which Diddy and his friends have to save their island from an evil intergalactic pig. The 5 worlds have 4 tracks, a battle mode, and even a boss battle. The tracks all have additional challenges like collecting all the coins and still winning, and the boss battles amount to just being the character in a race. It would be simple if the damn Triceratops didn't cheat! But alongside Diddy, the game contained many other playable characters. While not knowing then, Rareware was actually giving us a glimpse into the future.
Back in 1994, the team behind the original Donkey Kong Country started work on a new project for the Super Nintendo. Using the same pre-rendered style, their intention was to make Rare's magnum opus for the Super Nintendo. It was to be an RPG that composer Grant Kirkhope said blew his mind away. This project would be given the codename Dream. However, it became obvious that the scope of Dream would be too big for the Super Nintendo. And it wasn't just moved to the N64, but the N64 DD, oh god. This is the only known screenshot of the game. The character you see is Edison, who would team up with woodland friends to save his girlfriend from pirates. But eventually they decided he was just too generic, and Dream was too much even for the N64. So they completely retooled the game and designed it in the spirit of Super Mario 64. And leading the game will be one of Edison's friends, a bear named Banjo, and his bird friend, Kazooie. Words really can't describe how I feel about Banjo Kazooie. I remember the wonder and joy I had when I first played this game, years ago. The story is really nothing special, with Banjo having to venture deep into the lair of Gruntilda the Witch to rescue his sister Tootie. The object of the game is to collect puzzle pieces, aka jiggies, which unlock further levels. Each level is filled to the brim with things to explore and find, like Mumbo tokens, which, when given to Mumbo Jumbo, will let him transform you into any number of different creatures. And there are also eggs and feathers that Kazooie use. Each level is its own fascinating little adventure. You're always doing something new, something even more challenging, and a desire to complete every level by collecting all the jiggies, finding all 100 music notes, and hidden honeycombs. In fact, I feel safe in saying that Banjo Kazooie is better than Mario 64. Get the tomato! Banjo Kazooie would sell over 2.2 million copies and be considered a true classic of the N64. A year later, the team that brought you Blast Corps would bring their brand new game, Force Gemini. Force Gemini was a futuristic game starring Juno, his sister Vela, and their dog robot tank thing, Lupus, who are attacked by invading aliens, forced to land on the nearby planet and save their inhabitants from an invasion. Force Gemini was one of the first real examples of third-person shooting. When the player wants to aim, the camera moves right behind and presents a targeting reticule they can use to aim with the stick and straight with the C buttons. Unfortunately, the wrapping issue is back with this game, and that can prove seriously difficult when trying to attack snipers. Each of the 3 characters have specific abilities, meaning parts of each level can only be accessed by them. The sense of exploration, hidden secrets, and finding upgradable weapons gives it some similarities to the Metroid 64 that never was. Graphically, it was starting to become clear that the N64 was starting to show its age, as the team worked together to make an N64 game like no other, with dynamic lighting and reflections. However, controlling the characters got some getting used to. The game received a huge marketing push from Nintendo, despite Rareware actually deciding to publish the game themselves, including one of these hilariously bad videos you get in the mail with Nintendo Power back in the day.
So strap in, get in, and get funky as Hot News 64 takes you deep inside the splatter be splattered baddest bugs in the universe, science fiction action game of the century. You guys want to see this?
Okay man, might want to cut back on the coffee. And Coke. While Jet Force Gemini was fairly well received, it would only sell around 1 million copies. Not a failure, but coming from a company who was used to selling upwards of 8 million, it was a disappointment. But, on that video, they featured another game from Rare, and folks, the ape was back. Originally going under the titles Donkey Kong Country 64, Donkey Kong Universe, and Donkey Kong World, and planned for the ill-fared N64 DD, this game would instead be released on cartridge in 1999 alongside another N64 add-on. A year earlier, Nintendo released the N64 Expansion Pack, which doubled the console's power from 4 megabytes to 8. Ooh. Since its launch, it was treated as an optional accessory, offering extra modes and higher-res graphics. But due to a mysterious bug that could only be fixed with the expansion pack, Donkey Kong 64 was the first game to acquire the expansion. So it was included with the device, which Rare did at a great personal loss to themselves. So, let's boot up DK64 and... Oh. Oh no. No! No! No!
Put your hands together if you wanna clap. Let's relate to this monkey rap.
Yeah. The DK rap. One of the most cringe-worthy video game songs ever. Just listen to these lyrics.
His coconut gun can fire in spurts. If he shoots ya, it's gonna hurt.
That's what you get when you let a guy from Edinburgh write rap. The game itself features the return of Donkey Kong veteran baddie and Smash Bros. Snubbed King K. Rool with his plans to blow up Kong's Island and kidnap his friends and family. And it's up to DK to save the day. The game plays a lot like Banjo Kazooie, but there are fewer levels, mainly because you aren't playing one game. You're essentially playing 5 games. DK64 has 5 characters that you can switch using special barrels after you unlock them. Donkey and Diddy are back, obviously, but we're also introduced to new characters like Lanky Kong, Chunky Kong, and Dixie's little sister, Tiny Kong. Each character has their own color bananas to collect, their own gold bananas to find, their own projectiles and musical instruments. This means that the levels get really long and these worlds are big. So big that the developers put in teleport pads to help you go around. DK64 didn't do anything much that Banjo Kazooie didn't already do. In fact, the one thing that it did do was turn the Collectathon to 11. There are the gold bananas, which are like jiggies. Then there are the regular bananas, which you need to open the boss door of every stage on, and also getting 75 bananas for each of the 5 characters to get a banana medal. Then there are the supply crates for ammo, and Candy's headphones for the musical instruments. Oh, and this technician needs you to find his blueprint scattered in each level. And then each Kong's special ability is fueled by crystal coconuts, but you can carry more if you catch a banana fairy and Enough! Stop! Enough! Oh, God! Just cause you have the expansion pack didn't mean you need to go nuts! Now, speaking of the expansion pack, only 3 games in the N64 library require it. Donkey Kong 64, The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, and this. Following the success of Goldeneye, Rareware were approached to make a game for the movie sequel Tomorrow Never Dies. Martin Hollis, Goldeneye's director, said that Rareware turned it down without hesitation. Instead, Rare wanted to take what they had learned from Goldeneye and put it towards a brand new IP. Hollis believed there should be more games starring women, and taking inspiration from characters like Sky from The X-Files and franchises like Ghost in the Shell and Blade Runner, Hollis and his team set out to create a brand new sci-fi adventure. Hollis envisioned in his head the mechanic of light and dark playing a vital role in the game, like shooting lights out and using night vision to perform stealth. However, the console just wasn't powerful enough for that concept. After 14 months in the game's development, however, Martin Hollis left Rareware for Nintendo as a consultant for the company's upcoming new system. During the game's troubled 3-year development cycle, designers David Doak and Steve Ellis would leave Rareware as well to form Free Radical. But, at long last, in mid-2000, the game was finally released. Playing the lead role was Joanna d'Arc, whose name was based off the French pronunciation of Joan of Arc, a secret agent for the Carrington Institute, who was thrown into a deep conspiracy involving aliens and cloning the president. For the first time though, I have to give amazing props, as Perfect Dark is probably the best Rareware game in terms of aiming, as the auto-aim feature is an absolute blessing. Perfect Dark would feature an objective system much like Goldeneye. Plus, with the help of the expansion pack, the game offered some amazingly big and detailed levels. But, with this game released in 2000, I truly believe Perfect Dark was way before its time. The frame rate especially really begins to chug when the screen gets filled with enemies. The controller just doesn't have enough buttons, with you having to hold the button down to do things like crouching and aiming. Perfect Dark was just another title planned for that sodding 64DD add-on, with the hopes of using its built-in modem for online matchmaking. But when the game was moved to a cartridge, the team still suggested using online by way of a connection in the actual cartridge. But it was eventually scrapped. Another idea was using a Game Boy camera and the transfer pack to take photos of people's faces and use them in-game. However, the idea was also scrapped due to controversy surrounding the Columbine massacre. 6 months later, the much-awaited sequel to Banjo Kazooie was released, cleverly titled Banjo Tooie. Set 2 years after the original, Gruntilda's sisters come to rescue her body and attempt to revive her, but not before blowing up Banjo's house and killing their friend Bowles the Mole. Tooie took the original and just piled on so much more. Firstly, allowing Mumbo Jumbo as a playable character, and transformations regulated to a new character, Humbo Wumba. Kazooie was also now able to shoot both fire and grenade eggs. That must be painful. Banjo Tooie was just in general a much bigger game, but sadly, like Perfect Dark, the frame rate suffered from it. But now, I want to talk about a story. When I originally played Banjo Kazooie, I remember playing Freezy Easy Peak and exploring Woozy the Walrus's cave. I then went into first person, and I see something behind the ice. Is that an ice key? I spent days, weeks trying to figure out how to get to that damn thing. Then I found out about Stop and Swap. Originally, Rareware had a concept where playing Banjo Tooie would actually unlock content in the original game. This would be done via the RAM bus in the N64, and swapping out the cartridges in the span of 10 seconds. The original concept would have had you complete tasks in Tooie, swap out the cartridge for Kazooie, collect the items, and then swap it back for Tooie again. However, sadly, the feature was never truly implemented due to revisions in the N64 hardware that shortened the span to 1 second. Or, they could have just used a controller pack. But as most people know, the secrets could be unlocked via the cheat system in Treasure Trove Cove. In 1997, Rareware unveiled another animal platformer for the N64. This one being about Conker the Squirrel. Conker would actually make his debut alongside Banjo and Diddy Kong Racing before getting his own game on the Game Boy called Conker's Pocket Tales. It's all about Conker finding presents to save his girlfriend Berry, who was kidnapped by a giant evil acorn. The game, originally titled Conker Tales and then 12 Tales Conker 64, would see a lengthy development when it was decided that Conker 64 wasn't doing anything new and was just another platformer like Banjo and Donkey Kong 64. So Rareware decided to turn the entire game on its head. Conker would instead become the most beer-swilling, foul-mouthed, womanizing, money-grubbing, cute, cuddly squirrel ever. That game was Conker's Bad Fur Day. After a heavy night of drinking and seriously feeling it the next morning, Conker just wants to get home to his girlfriend Berry, but is thrown into a crazy adventure from horny bees, to Ponzi catfish, to cavemen, to talking rocks, and a weasel mafia. They make it very, very clear that this game is for mature audiences only. And believe me, it is. From foul language,
Why is it everybody so offensive around here?
sexual references, violence, and a lot, and I mean a lot, of poo. While Conker is going through his adventure, there is another story of the Panther King not being able to put his milk on the table without spilling it. And his scientist discovers the only solution is a red squirrel. While the game does look and play similar to Banjo Kazooie, Conker is more of a linear story with no multiple worlds to get to. There's also very little in collecting. Besides money, all that is there is chocolate, which Conker uses for health, and tails, which are his lives. It isn't the easiest Rareware game, with falling damage almost all the time, spitting blades of death, drowning, and just bad luck. But the game makes up for it in its absolute crude humor and amazing variety. Thanks to the context-sensitive B buttons that give Conker just what he needs at that moment, like dynamite, a flamethrower, or lots and lots of booze, which he then uses to piss on everything and then get hungover 20 seconds later. God, what a lightweight. But of course we can't go any further without talking about this.
me. I am the great mighty Pooh, and I'm going to throw my shit at you. A huge supply of tish comes from my chocolate starfish. How about some scat, you little twat?
The Great Mighty Pooh symbolizes the best and worst of this game. Of course, he is iconic to this game. You think of this game, you think of the Great Mighty Pooh. Just don't think about while you're eating. But for a game that's designed as mature, it is truly juvenile. I mean, to be fair, South Park came out a few years earlier. However, Nintendo liked their kid-friendly image very much. So the game got little promotion, but would receive an ad in Playboy. That, and being released in 2001, the game sold well below expectations, with only around 55,000 copies in the first month. Alongside Conker, Rareware was actually working on another N64 title. This one taking heavy influence from Nintendo's Legend of Zelda series. The game was being said to be one of the biggest games made for the system. Its name was Dinosaur Planet. The game was set to star the Vixen Crystal, the Triceratops Tricky, and the Fox Saber. However, during development, Shigeru Miyamoto saw the game and noticed a striking resemblance to one of Nintendo's characters. So, alongside suggesting that they move the game to Nintendo's next console, the GameCube, he also suggested replacing Saber with Fox McCloud. And thus, in 2002, Starfox Adventures was born.
Why is it always such a chore to get up? Hello!
Fox, what are you doing?
The game begins similar to what we saw in the footage of Dinosaur Planet, with Crystal riding a pterodactyl and meeting General Scales. But then the game goes to Fox. That's one of the biggest changes between Dinosaur Planet and this game. Crystal was originally planned as the main playable character alongside Saber, but the game had to be completely reworked to fit Starfox, which wasn't to everyone on the team's liking. After the absolute tease of flying in your R-Wing, Fox lands on Dinosaur Planet to investigate why the planet is falling apart. Finds Crystal's staff and the wounded Queen of the Earthwalker tribe looking for her son. Fox heads out and finds her son Tricky, who joins him in finding the Korozoa spirits needed to save the planet and Crystal. Even before Miyamoto's involvement, the game played a lot like Legend of Zelda, from the combat to find numerous items to continue your quest, like bomb spores and upgrades to your staff. You can also use the staff to fire projectiles, but god damn it! The rapping is back too! Then we have Tricky, who at the beginning is just another mouth you have to feed. Literally, you have to keep feeding him mushrooms so he can do things like finding secrets, and then later on, using his flame powers. That still doesn't stop him from being an annoying little shit. But, besides a few niggling issues, Starfox Adventures is actually a damn good game. The design of the world is what we'd expect from Rareware, and it was just a glimpse of what we'd expect from them with the GameCube. Is what I would like to say. By 2002, Nintendo owned a 49% stake in the company. Game development costs were getting higher and higher, and the Stammer brothers needed more capital. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions is that Nintendo bought a 49% stake from the very beginning. But I have information saying otherwise. Initially, Nintendo bought between a 5 and 10% stake in the company. Whenever Rare needed more money, they would receive it in exchange for another piece of the company. This went for a while until they reached 49-51. The Stampers didn't want to own a stake in a company they didn't own, so they decided it was time to sell. They had actually been looking for a buyer for the last 2 years. Potential buyers were Activision and Microsoft, and for the longest time Activision had the better offer. But for reasons we don't know, it fell through, which left Microsoft, who had just gone into the home console scene with their brand new Xbox, and they needed high-profile names to get their studio off the ground. And then here comes Rareware. However, before Microsoft could seal the deal, Nintendo had the legal right to buy Rare for whatever price Microsoft offered. So, they offered $370 million for the studio. Something Nintendo was either unable or unwilling to shell out. And on the 24th of September, 2002, one day after Starfox Adventures was released, Rareware was purchased by Microsoft.
For the last 2 years, this project has just been haunted with rumors. There's been rumors and speculation. Microsoft buying Sega, Microsoft buying Vivendi, Square, you name the company, we've been accused of buying them. The latest rumor is what? Rare, that Microsoft's buying Rare. I just wanted to come up before Sandy finishes and say in front of all of you, well, it's true.
Again?
Well, you're telling your son got into the Xbox One thing.
This guy. What's he talking about?
As you can see from this trailer shown at X02, things look promising. He was Conker, Banjo, Joanna, and... Who the hell is that? But for a Nintendo fan, this was surely heartbreaking on numerous levels. Firstly, it really did look like Rareware was wanting to stay with Nintendo, as we saw Space World previews for a next-gen Banjo Kazooie, Perfect Dark, and even a brand new Donkey Kong racing title. But from what I've read, there's even more heartbreaking news. Nintendo had the right to keep all of Rareware's IPs that they made with them. According to reports, Nintendo sold Rare their IPs back because the Stamper brothers were good friends with NOA's Minoru Arakawa and Howard Lincoln. This is why Nintendo was still allowed to use Crystal, who was originally created by Rareware, and Rare can still use Conker, who was originally made for Diddy Kong Racing. This mutual departure would help in the near future. But now, Rareware was a Microsoft first-party developer, and with that change, they decided to drop half their name and just be Rare for the first time since 1994. So, they're on a brand new system, brand new owner, and Rare's first title on the Xbox would be a game originally designed for the GameCube. And it was grabbed by the Ghoulies. The story of Ghoulies stars Cooper and his girlfriend Amber, who get lost and wind up at a mansion. No sooner do they get there, but the evil Baron Von Ghoul sends his ghost to kidnap Amber, and Cooper rushes afterwards to follow them before getting surrounded by imps and almost wetting himself before the butler saves him. The game plays like this. You use the left stick to move and the right stick to attack. You point the stick in the direction of the enemies and Koopa delivers a flurry of punches and kicks. Each room Koopa goes to, Baron Von Ghoul randomly decides how much health he has, and most rooms have their own challenges. Sometimes simple like beat all the enemies. Others involve only beating certain types of enemies, or only using weapons, or in a lot of time. Failing these tasks could send the Grim Reaper after you, who faints you if he touches you. Plus, Koopa is an absolute scaredy cat. There are times when he receives a jump scare and you must complete a button prompt to help him relieve from his fright. That, and honestly, the game is just too boring and simple for its own good. And commercially, it was an absolute flop, selling only around 100,000 copies. Okay, so no good start. Rare may be regretting leaving Nintendo now, which in some ways they didn't completely do. Because of the good terms they left the company, and because Microsoft did have a stake in the handheld market, Rare was able to develop games for the GBA, with publishing help from THQ. Cause like Microsoft will be caught dead publishing a game on a Nintendo system. Shut up. Rare would develop smaller titles for the handheld like the platformer Gruntilda's Revenge, the flying racing game Banjo Pilot, and the puzzle game It's Mr. Pants, which was originally planned as a Donkey Kong game. After Bad Fur Day, a team at Rareware started work on a sequel called Conker's Other Bad Day. They even got deep into developing the story with King Conker being thrown into jail after spending all the kingdom's money on hookers and blow. But after the purchase, Microsoft wasn't interested in the sequel, and instead went for a remake. And in 2005, Conker Live and Reloaded was released. First off, holy crap, this game looks amazing! I've always been a person who believes Conker and Banjo Tooie should have held off until the GameCube, and this is just proof of that. This game improves on everything from the visuals to the frame rate, and while for the most part it's a straight up remake, some things have been changed. The most noticeable change is Conker's weapon of choice being switched from a frying pan to a baseball bat. Even more so, to use it you need to switch to an over-the-shoulder view and use the trigger to swing. You are supposed to be able to do a 3-swing combo, but the game is so picky with the timing, so mostly it's like swing, fella next to barn prompts, and get attacked by these damn enemies. But here's the craziest part. The game actually went backwards with censoring.
Fuck you, asshole. Fuck you, asshole. And I am going to throw my shit at you. A huge supply of teach comes from my chocolate stuffed fish. How about some scat, you little twat?
I mean, this boggles my mind. Nintendo, a company who was once ruthless with keeping itself clean and pure, was more liberal with the swearing than Microsoft. The live aspect of the title was to represent the new Xbox Live multiplayer. Of course, as we all know, original Xbox Live was discontinued back in 2010. But hey, Conker's on a brand new system and may actually have a chance this time. Right? It's no surprise that the other Conker sequel titled Getting Medieval was cancelled as well. With only 2 titles released on the original Xbox and neither of them being commercial successes, Rare would go all out on the launch of the Xbox 360, with not 1, but 2 titles on launch day, both starring women. The first one we'll look at was originally a title planned for the GameCube. That game was Kameo. The game was moved from the GameCube and planned as an original Xbox title that first appeared in that XO 2-bit we showed earlier. But development was continuously revamped and put on hold until it finally released on the 360. Kameo's story tells us how her elf queen mother bestowed upon her the power of the Whatnot book, which leads her sister into a jealous rage, who in turn unleashes an ancient evil, kidnaps and tortures her family, and leads the world to be conquered by the Troll Army. The game revolves around absorbing elemental sprites, which are a wide variety of creatures, each with their own skills and abilities. The gameplay has Kameo switching between all her forms to complete tasks. Each character has their own different abilities that are needed throughout the game, but usually for most of the game you just stick with 3 or 4 main characters. I mean, if one of your choices is a dragon, you go with a dragon! Graphically, like always, Kameo is vibrant and very well detailed, but the gameplay is really lacking in areas. I was almost getting into the game, but the controls are really not intuitive. The face buttons are set to quick change Kameo's forms, so the action buttons are the triggers. Using the left and right trigger by themselves work fine. It's when the game has to use them both. Couldn't you just use the bumpers, mate? The Whatnot book is also an arrogant piece of literature.
There's some expert advice from yours truly, waiting in the Whatnot.
Sure, there are times when he genuinely helps, but most of the time he's just Navi with a pompous British accent. But I gave up when a boss battle called for me to knock a bomb, cue ball style, off a ramp and missing, and getting electrocuted for my trouble. Yeah, and once again, sales were absolutely dismal, selling around 200 to 400,000 copies, and a planned sequel was cancelled. But fortunately, there was another title, Perfect Dark Zero. Finally, a sequel to one of Rare's best original games. New next-gen system, twin-stick controller, online multiplayer. This has to be good, right? Right?
Drop that bass. Drop that
Perfect Dark Zero, a prequel to the original, was once again another title originally designed for the GameCube, planned for the original Xbox before finally releasing on the Xbox 360. The game focuses on rookie Joanna, and what should have been an amazing title being the spiritual sequel to Goldeneye, instead was an absolute mess. The game had to continuously put travel beacons on the floor so you wouldn't get lost. The moon was sluggish and enemy AI was absolutely pathetic. Plus, when Halo 3 would come out 2 years later, it was widely forgotten. Sure, it was an absolute flop, selling upwards of 700,000 copies, but much like everything else lately, plans for a sequel in Perfect Dark Core were cancelled. So, by now, Rare has been a Microsoft-owned developer for 4 years, released 4 underwhelming titles, and caused numerous cancellations and veteran members of the company to leave. Okay, focus. No, I can do this. Back in 2002, Tim Stamper had an idea for a garden simulator for the Pocket PC. This idea would sprout after the Microsoft acquisition to feature animals. And in an attempt to keep it unique and family-friendly, the game would star piñatas. And thus, Viva Pinata was born and released in 2006. Come on, give me something. Anything, please!
done! You attracted a worm!
By this time, many people would have given up on Rare, citing their Microsoft acquisition as an absolute disaster. Even worse, in 2007, the founders, Tim and Chris Stamper, would leave Rare. This news sent shockwaves throughout the entire industry. The brothers stuck to their trademark silence, only saying they wanted to pursue other opportunities. This should have been the final nail for many people. That would be the case if it wasn't for the fact 2 months before the release of Viva Pinata, something arrived that gave us hope. In September of that year, a trailer was released showing Banjo and Kazooie in an updated style, an HD look at Spiral Mountain, with honeycombs, musical notes, and jiggies. This was it. Finally, after years of waiting, Banjo 3E was finally coming! The prophecies were true! Maybe now Rare was finally turning itself around, right? 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 Whack! 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 Why don't you whack! 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 Ah! Okay. 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 Fuck! Okay. 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 Alright. Let's give nuts and bolts its day in court.
Once upon a time, there lived a heroic bear called Banjo, a rather loud bird called Kazooie, and an unpleasant witch called Gruntilda.
So, the game opens up telling us the story of Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie. But with nothing else to do, our heroes become fat and lazy, eating pizza and playing video games. But the skull of Gruntilda finally makes her way back, and thus the third part of our amazing story is about to... What the hell happened? They are interrupted by the Lord of Gaming, or Log, or as I like to call him, a focus test in physical form. What? What the hell are you talking about? So, instead of a pointless collectathon, we are thrown into a new world, driving around in a stupid trolley. I think by now all Banjo Kazooie fans are responding the same way.
This is bullshit! This is bullshit! Get the bricks! Yeah!
Anyway, let's talk about the development behind Nuts and Bolts. Originally, Rare was just gonna make a direct sequel, Banjo 3, but feared the game would be too stale. Right, because Mario and Zelda are totally stale. At that same time, however, another prototype was being made, titled Banjo Kazooie, a kart racer for the original Xbox that would allow players to build their own vehicles. This would be the basis for Nuts and Bolts. Now, graphically, once again, this game looks beautiful, stunning huge levels. I just wish I could enjoy them if the handling of these vehicles weren't so bullshit! The worst thing is, the game is made way more complicated than it ever needed to be. Find the person with a quest. Congratulations! You completed the task in the right time to get a Jiggy. Now take that Jiggy using Kazooie's magic wrench, which replaces all her special moves, and take it to the central doohickey at the center of the map to unlock more levels, and every new world opens with this cheesy 70s TV credits. And seriously, why the fuck is this all in Comic Sans? Why? What did Banjo Kazooie do to deserve this? What was stopping you from making original characters or a spin-off? I mean, seriously, you have this entire library of characters you could have used. You could have called it Kempen Nuts and Bolts. Why drag Banjo and Kazooie into this? And you know what the most insulting part about this whole thing is? There is one loading screen that flatly says if you don't like the new driving gameplay, then you should just play the original games in the Xbox Live Arcade. Yes, Microsoft released Banjo Kazooie, Banjo Tooie, and Perfect Dark in HD on the Xbox Live Arcade. They even negotiated with Nintendo to release Goldeneye both on the Xbox Live Arcade and Virtual Console, but Nintendo refused. And here is the reason why. Yes, Rareware made the game, but they did so with Nintendo owning the Bond license. Much like in the same way Rareware made Donkey Kong games. Nintendo really didn't have to say yes to anything, as Microsoft didn't have a leg to stand on. And even if Nintendo said yes, they'd be allowing Microsoft to release an upscale HD version with online multiplayer, while they would get the as-is Virtual Console release. And even if they agreed to that, they still have the hurdles of United Artists, who made the Goldeneye film, and their new owners, MGM. Not to mention whoever owned the Bond game license at the time. So seriously, that's the mess with Goldeneye. And that mess isn't half the mess Nuts and Bolts is. And well, once again, the game sold poorly, with only reaching 700,000 copies. After Nuts and Bolts, it was becoming obvious that Rare wasn't delivering, and Microsoft decided to do a major restructuring of the company. In 2009 at E3, Microsoft unveiled Project Natal, a motion-sensitive camera that was Microsoft's answer to the Wii craze. A year later, that camera would be revealed as Kinect. Leading up to E3 2010, however, Rare's website got a facelift, a new logo, and a tease for something to be announced at E3. Obviously, everyone was excited. Will we get a new Killer Instinct? Like we've been asking for years? A new Conker? Banjo 3! No, apparently Microsoft wanted a studio to lead the development of Kinect titles. And guess who that company was? Where the hell is my Kinect anyway? Knowing me, it's probably in the oh my god. Oh crap. Look at all this shit. The fuck is all this stuff? Crap, it could be anywhere. Well, guess I should probably start look. Oh, here it is.
Welcome. Let's play sports.
Kinect Sports is what you expect. It is just Wii Sports, only much more exhausting. There is bowling, beach volleyball, track and field, table tennis, boxing, and football. The only real problem is Kinect requires a ton of space to work properly, and this is as far as I can get. For the most part, the games work okay. The camera responds to most of my movements, except when I require my legs, and suddenly it feels like I'm a source machinima. But the games just feel so hollow. And I'm just flapping my arms, running in spot or jumping. And no, I don't want to see myself looking like an idiot. And all this game does is break me into a sweat. And because this was 2010, and it was the peak of motion control phenomenon, this game sold over 3 million copies. And yes, I am aware there are sequels, Kinect Sports Season 2 and Kinect Sports Rival for the Xbox One, but there is no way I am playing those. It's a Rare finally made a game that sold, but for what? Destroying everything they built, losing their founders, developing for something that had really no long-lasting appeal? And while the first two Kinect Sport games did sell well, Kinect Sports Rivals in the Xbox One didn't fare well, selling over 500,000 only. It was then announced that Kinect would no longer be a priority. But a year before Rivals' release, saw an announcement no one saw coming.
Coming to your home in 2013, only on Xbox One! Jago! Glacius! Saberwolf! Ultra Combo! Killer Instinct.
Finally, after 20 years of hoping, begging, praying, Killer Instinct was coming back. But something Phil Spencer said really ticked me off.
We listened, and Killer Instinct is back, only on Xbox One.
We listened? We listened? You didn't listen to shit! Rare wanted to make Killer Instinct 3 for years! And you were too busy trying to catch Nintendo's coattails to notice! And you want to know the worst part? This game wasn't even made by Rare. It was made by Double Helix. And that highlights the worst thing about all this. Microsoft owns all of Rare's IPs, so they can do anything they want with them. Like put Conker in Project Spark. It's called Conker's Big Reunion. It's episodic content in Project Spark. It looks and acts horrible, and basically what a bunch of suits would make if they were asked to make a Conker game. And it got cancelled before any other episodes could get made. So, how does that make you feel?
I love you! I love you!
So, enough negativity. Let's look at what could have been. Imagine for a second what would have happened had Rareware stayed with Nintendo. Either second party or bought completely as a first party dev. Well, for starters, the GameCube would have gotten a lot more damn good exclusives. We would have hopefully gone Perfect Dark Zero, that Conker sequel, maybe even Banjo 3. Oh, and Donkey Kong Racing. And who knows, maybe Kameo and Ghoulies could have fared better on a system that was better suited for them. Plus, Rareware could have seen what this other studio was working on at the time. You know the one, what's it called? Oh, Retro Studios. And be very impressed with what they saw. So impressed, they form an alliance. Could you imagine what could have transpired from that? And the Wii? Well, you know the magic wrench mechanic in Nuts and Bolts. Imagine if after 3E, they released Nuts and Bolts as the spin-off, and you could use the Wii functionality to pick up objects. I'm not going to say the game would have been any better, but that was the first game released after the Stamper Brothers left. Would the Stampers have left if Nintendo owned things? Who's to say? But I can tell you that Conker's creator Chris Sever has stated that the major exodus of higher-up employees after Rare was bought by Microsoft wouldn't have happened otherwise. But on the other hand, you need to think, why Nintendo never pulled the trigger and bought the company? Did they just not see the investment? Maybe, just maybe, Rareware's decline in quality was their own fault. Maybe. But that theory falls apart because of what essentially happened with Rare after the purchase. According to Sever again, he tells us Microsoft originally promised to leave Rare alone until, quote, production managers started to appear, asking all sorts of banal questions. More and more strange people were appearing in the corridor, like a parade of eggs with eyes, wanting to see the game. This was the big issue. Microsoft had no idea how Rare was run, and just tried to shove it into its corporate structure, not even caring if it fit or not. Biggest example? Kinect. And there's one person to blame with that. Scott Henson. Scott was a Microsoft guy through and through, who was one of the main designers behind the 360 and Kinect. And he was appointed Rare's studio manager. When? In 2010. The same year they switched to Kinect. That's why I believe Phil Spencer when he said, "We didn't force Rare to make Kinect games." Of course not. When you have someone who called Kinect a rich canvas and just tying the company line, I'm not surprised. Microsoft never truly knew what they were getting when they bought Rareware. The company worked best as an independent, left to its own devices and allowed to prosper and grow. This is how big a deal Rareware was. There was a certain Nintendo developer who would visit at times to see what they were doing, see how amazing their games looked, and went back to make his just as good. Do you know who that developer was? Shigeru fucking Miyamoto! Rareware was the envy of the goddamn Da Vinci of gaming. That's the company you bought, and you did what with it? Rare didn't need to make Kinect Sports. You spent $370 million on a company, and for what? Any studio could have made Kinect Sports. For example, the studio you made to make Kinect games! In fact, Rare actually wanted to make a more advanced sports game, but Don Matrick told them just to make their own Wii Sports. I mean, there was nothing stopping Rare from focusing on Kinect and normal IPs at the same time. The saddest thing of all is that Microsoft never needed Rare. I can understand why. The company was for sale, it had name recognition, they saw their numbers with Nintendo and went, "Ooh, we could use some of that." But really, Rare never helped the Xbox. What did help the Xbox was only 2 games. Just look at the sales figures. Rare games just never worked with who the Xbox was trying to cater to. In fact, do you know what has been the best received game by Rare on an Xbox system?
There were games that blew us apart, and games that brought us together. Whether you're reliving childhood memories or discovering classics for the first time, you'll see why the best stories will never be forgotten.
This past year saw an anthology of Rare's greatest titles. Well, except the ones that actually sold the most, and Kinect. And after you spend hours installing on the Xbox One, you finally get to relive some of the company's best moments. I will give them credit. Whoever coded the N64 emulator is a genius. Conker and Jet Force Gemini look amazing. Hell, Jet Force even has a modern controller option, which works amazing. But playing these games on Xbox just feels a little dirty. Just seeing those slight modifications to the original just makes me feel like a bad adulterer. But why? Why do we hold this company in such high regard? Why, out of all the studios in the world, we place this one on a pedestal like no other? Maybe it's because of how much Rare was part of our youth. Part of some of our greatest gaming experiences. That first time seeing Donkey Kong Country. Those 2 AM summer parties playing Goldeneye. The joy of exploring and playing Banjo Kazooie. The simple truth is this. The Rare we know and love is gone. It got absorbed into the machine known as Microsoft. And to all those people saying, Nintendo should buy Rare back, it's not gonna happen. And even if it did, Microsoft owned all the IPs. The only way it will happen is if Microsoft decides to scrap Xbox entirely, go third party, and develop Rare IP games as Nintendo exclusives. Or put simply, fucking never! Sure, Phil Spencer can tweet that he'd love to see Banjo Kazooie in Smash Brothers, but tweeting something doesn't mean anything. Negotiations would be a mess. Microsoft would say, if you want these two in Smash, then we want Donkey Kong and Rare Replay. And Nintendo would want their own version of Replay, or at least the Rare 64 titles on the Virtual Console. And then there's negotiations over who gets what in profit shares, and the Amiibo shares. But, from the ashes that was Rareware, rose something greater. Nintendo-created Retro Studios has become essentially the new incarnation of Rareware. While they created Goldeneye and Perfect Dark, Retro would give us the legendary Metroid Prime series. And of course, bring life back into the Donkey Kong series with their amazing Donkey Kong Country Return titles on Wii, Wii U, and 3DS. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Playtona Games, a studio founded by former Rare developers like Chris Sutherland, Grant Kirkhope, Steve Mayles, and Gavin Price to create the Kickstarter-funded spiritual sequel to Banjo Kazooie, Yooka-Laylee. Funding they reached in less than an hour. And Nintendo? It may be in your best interest to buy this company and make them first party. Don't make the same mistake again. Rare as we knew it may be gone, but its influences stretch far and wide. We're a history spanning over 30 years and over 100 games. Even after all this, I've only really scratched the surface. What will Sea of Thieves be like? Will it be any good? I would like to think it will. But regardless of that, nothing will be able to take away your love and memories of these games. Games that were truly a rare experience.